Welcome back to Straight from the Crates. Today we are talking about the Slits and their first album, Cut. And the conversation around Blue Eyed Soul always gets complicated because there's a real history of white artists getting rewarded for black art forms while the originators get overlooked, exploited, or erased. Rock, jazz, reggae, R&B, over and over and over again, the industry found ways to make black innovation more commercially acceptable once white artists performed and repackaged it. That conversation does matter, but every once in a while you run into an album where the fusion actually feels respectful, adventurous, and genuinely transformative instead of full on corporate theft. And that's where the Slits come in. For me, I feel the Slits album Cut isn't some polished imitation of reggae or jazz meant to water black music down, specifically for white audiences. This album sounds messy, nervous, playful, rebellious, quite awkward, funky, and alive. It feels like a bunch of weird white British girls completely obsessed with R&B, experimentation, trying to figure out what punk could become once it stopped being just loud guitars and nihilism, and somehow it works brilliantly. But what makes Cut special to me is how naturally it fuses punk with reggae and dub. Punk in the late 70s was often rigid and aggressive. The straight lines, fast tempos, the sneering vocals. And reggae introduced space and swing and groove into the air. And the bass lines, they became the center of gravity instead of the guitars. So the Slits, they understood that immediately. They didn't just throw reggae on the punk songs as a decoration, they rebuilt the music around the rhythm itself. And Pong Affair, that's a perfect example of what that sounds like. And for me, that's kind of like genius. The song, it's funny, sarcastic, flirtatious, and almost cartoonish, but musically it's locked in. Like the bass line bounces with the loose dub energy, while the guitars stab in and out, almost like free jazz fragments. And Ari's up vocals sound untrained, but in the best possible way. Like it's really wild and conversational, but then suddenly it becomes sharp and confrontational. Feels like a performance and more like it doesn't, it's more like not a performance and more like a chaotic conversation at a party. And for me, it's it resembles modern indie and post punk bands. And it's like all these bands from like the 80s and 90s, it's like they were trying to, it sounds like to when I listen to music today that they're trying to recreate this exact same energy but not doing it so well. And then you get So Tough, which might be one of the coolest anti male or anti macho punk songs ever recorded. Like the whole thing mocks toughness and posturing while sounding completely unconcerned with with traditional sound structures. Like the song is everywhere. And the reggae rhythm and jazz section loosens I'd say the arrangements, and the punk attitude is then added on top of that, which just makes it sound even more amazing. And the Slits, in my opinion, they weren't trying to sound perfect. They wanted personality over polish. And that became like the blueprint for so much alternative music later. And that's why I feel like this album aged so well. And the album to me is deeply feminine without trying to sound respectable or marketable. It talks about love, dating, attraction, boredom, insecurities, and relationships, and social performance, but in a messy, funny, bratty way that felt pretty cool and new at the time. And these weren't women trying to compete with men in punk by becoming harder or more masculine. They created their own language entirely. And you can hear the DNA of the Riot Grrrl movement all over this album. Years before Riot Grrrl even existed, and bands like Bikini Kill and Slater Kinney inherited that raw honesty and the rejection of technical perfection, and the idea that women could be loud, weird, political, and emotional also funny and confrontational at the same time. And for me, it seems like Cut helped open that door. And what's also important is that the Slits came out of a multicultural London at the time when punk and reggae scenes were colliding constantly, and black Jamaican sound systems were all over the British punk clubs, and dub producers and political unrest and immigrant culture was all around Great Britain, and all this tension is inside the album. So while appropriation conversations are important, Cut also represents genuine cultural exchange. You can hear the admiration in the music and also the curiosity, and you hear the experimentation. The reggae influence isn't hidden or denied, it's celebrated. And honestly, that's why I like this album, and it always feels like it's refreshing and modern. And sometimes, new music can be too calculated and image driven, and Cut sounds fearless. It's imperfect, and it's girls making noise, flirting, mocking, and, mocking gender roles and dancing to dub bass lines and accidentally, changing alternative music forever. So for me, I love this album. You guys tell me what you think about it in the comments. And also remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.